Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise in support of the amended motion. I do so with particular interest, given that my electorate holds all of the Flinders, pardon me, all of the Flinders precinct, including the Flinders Medical Centre, which is the biggest teaching, clinical and training hospital in South Australia. I'll focus my remarks primarily on the SA pathology, and I'll do that because I've had extensive interaction with a large number of SA pathology employees, both as the member for Davenport and in particular prior to that as a candidate in particular in 2017. So I've met with pathologists, technicians, teaching staff and union reps, and it's part of what I've derived as a result is in fact germane to, and I will share, germane to this discussion. Insofar as pathology, the nature of pathology services themselves are concerned, the Grattan report, the Grattan Institute put a report out in 2016 which talked about the ongoing increase in services, pathology services per patient. This is a reality for all public health providers or health providers, and we've got a situation where from 2004-05 in the intervening decade to 2014-15 there was an increase of 40% in the per person pathology services provided, 15% of that due to an increase in the number of people deriving a test, and in particular 25% of that increase being due to extra tests per person. So that's the landscape, and I'll return to that because it is particularly germane to the way in which SA pathology is funded, and in particular the state of its books and its processes that we as a government inherited. Insofar as SA pathology is concerned, SA pathology is, in many respects, the best public pathology service in Australia. Some of the indicators for that could be, for example, a report which was compiled in 2007, an article written on behalf of the Australasian Society for Clinical Immunology and Allergy Primary Immunodeficiency Diseases Committee, 2007, and it made the point that, talking about primary immunodeficiency diseases in Australia, that the prevalence per 100,000 of population was 5.6 in Australia, but 12.4 for the state of South Australia, and as a result, the Australian, or the presumed Australian rate was bumped up. That is a measure, one measure, of the strike rate, if you will, of the SA pathology services in conducting their tests and isolating these particular types of diseases. What I also found interesting, and these are this is data provided to me by the people that I talked about before, members of SA pathology, technicians, scientists and the like. Another very interesting stat, Mr Deputy Speaker, is the fact that it might interest members to know that if the Australian Government's Australian Institute of Health and Welfare Statistics latest set published pertain to 2016-17, if they are to be believed, then where diagnostic and allied health professionals' costs are concerned, South Australia has the lowest per capita cost diagnostic, including pathology, recurrent expenditure in Australia, and South Australia has the highest efficiency diagnostic, including pathology, workforce in Australia, serving more than double the number of people per person employed on an FTE basis than, for example, New South Wales does. So just to recap, in 2016-17, the Australian federal government's statistical reports indicated that on a per capita basis, South Australia had the lowest per capita cost and the highest efficiency. That's the system that existed in 2016-17. Another thing that's arisen, and I'll deal more with it later, but to one of the other factors which I've become aware of as a result of the very extensive involvement I've had with SA's pathology is the advent of a practice known as coning. Now, coning was introduced in 1992 as a means of offsetting the cost of providing the ever-increasing number of per-patient tests, and it works by means of the government, the federal government, only paying for the 3 most expensive tests items. Dr Michael Harrison, the CEO of Sullivan Nicolaides Pathology in Brisbane, was quoted in the Royal College of Pathologists of Australasia in 2015, pointing out that there are potentially 20% of all potentially rebatable tests being performed for free here in South Australia. In Australia. The evidence is that SA Pathology is performing and has performed over a long period of time most of the free tests for the private sector, and as a result has, by any measure, a substantial revenue result. Deleterious revenue result, I should say. So the practice of coning, as I said, results in there being no dollars paid for the remaining tests that are conducted, and also no entry of the work conducted into the official statistics that are kept for the hospital system. What we've seen with Labor and SA Pathology is Olympic class hypocrisy. As other speakers have alluded, in 2014 they commissioned an EY report which recommended cuts of 300 full-time employees, and in 2015 they implemented a 200 FTE cuts program, all without any engagement with staff or without any release of the data. And as I alluded, in 2017 it was my very great pleasure to be in a meeting of SA Pathology staff as they were being told in 2017 of the pending cuts made by the prior government. There was absolutely no doubt as to what was occurring, no consultation, lots and lots of fear. I've heard discussions earlier today about fear. These people were threatened about speaking out. Lots of slashing without any consideration of the low costs that SA Pathology has and the lost revenue as a result of the poor practices put in place by the previous government. We've moved from having Olympic-class privatisers when in government, and we now have Olympic-class hypocrites when in opposition. I might also point out that in direct contrast with what staff wanted, the previous government implemented the EPLIS system such that the impact on SA Pathology and its processes and staff output, as well as safety, was such that the safety concerns incidence rate rose alarmingly. It's worth pointing out that in this context, what we're working with is an SA Pathology system which is busted, historically broken as a direct result of the ignorance and lack of detail and lack of transparency of the previous government. The Flinders Medical Centre in 2011, their emergency department had 60,000 people processed in that year in a facility designed to do 70,000 people. In 2018, they pushed through 92,000, a 50% increase in 7 years. This was foisted on them by Transforming Health. This was a direct result, is a direct result of the closure of the repat and the services it provided in this respect, as well as the gutting of the Noongar Hospital. This government will continue to work to fix these issues. This government has undertaken to release the underlying data, and I look forward to analysing that data and continuing to fight for the best possible outcomes for SA Pathology, Flinders Medical Centre and my constituents.
Somebody has the